there are three factors that universally apply for all adaptive systems at all scales. Finite resources will continue to change, and others are adapting, and especially adapting to the successes as well as to the shortfalls. That produces two kinds of directions for adaptation: seeking opportunity and handling challenge. Now we need to introduce a temporal frame of reference. Seeking opportunity, how does that work in an acute time frame versus how does it work in a looking ahead, future-oriented time frame, an extended time frame and a variable time frame into the future? Similarly, for handling challenge, we can look at that in an acute local time frame, or we can look at it into a extended into the future-oriented time frame. So we have the future-oriented time frame ahead versus an acute time frame centered on now, the past, and the immediate future. So let's talk about those two time frames. We can think about it first in the context of seeking opportunity. In the acute time frame, organizations, people in different roles trying to get advantage. Right? Faster, better, cheaper is the phrase we'll use to refer to this kind of process in the acute time frame. And we draw that from the history of NASA's experience and mishaps in the late 90s and in the rise, one of the stimulus to the rise and introduction of resilience engineering in the 2000 to 2004 time frame. So faster, better, cheaper pressure means what's going on? I'm trying to look back and better understand how systems work so that they can be improved. They can be made, often the expression would be more optimal relative to certain criteria. Faster, better, cheaper. But the key is this is defined, faster, better, cheaper is defined in this acute time frame that looks at the past, determines better how that could work, right? And then deploys something forward, right, into the just ahead to get an improvement, a delta. Great. Faster, better, cheaper. Now, there is an acute time frame on the handling challenge as well. Now, what's going on in handling challenge? Right? Gaps, messiness inevitably arises, surprises inevitably occur because we have a bounded competence envelope, right? Due to the trade-offs that arise back to our three basic characteristics or drivers of this universe. So if gaps are always going to arise, that means handling challenges requires gap filling. We talk about this as snafus are normal and snafu catching is essential. Back to our idea that extensibility, right, in the face of potential brittle collapse, defines ultimately what's critical here in handling challenge. But under this acute time frame, right, the local perspective, trying to fill the gaps, trying to make some system operate smoothly, operate well, and operate well under what? Faster, better, cheaper pressure. So faster, better, cheaper pressure, there'll still be gaps. Remember the complexification video that we've run through. There will still be gaps, gap filling happens. The gap filling tends to be very local. It's local in the context and perspective of the operational or sharp end perspectives trying to fill the gaps. Now, that's a kind of adaptive behavior that can be successful. But because it happens in this acute time frame, right, broader perspectives, bringing in other factors, a different time horizon, right, can show that those adaptations, while locally adaptive, can be from a more global or regional perspective maladaptive. That's fundamentally related to the way the three forms of breakdown in adaptive systems. locally adaptive, but more globally maladaptive. So that's a limit on the acute time frame for handling challenge. Just like searching for faster, better, cheaper pressure in the acute time frame on the seeking opportunity, right, doesn't just expand the competence envelope, as we showed in the complexification video, right? It shifts the competence envelope, and there is still borderlands where surprise happens. So what we end up with is how there are limits both on the opportunity and the challenge side when we stay in the acute time frame. Again, that is looking backwards, right? In handling challenge, we look backwards, we have an experience of gaps, and we locally adapt to mitigate or bridge those gaps. So again, it's looking back, all right, learning things that they can be projected forward, right, to get an incremental benefit in the near term. Right? I can better handle gaps. I can share that with others. I can find different ways to improve different parts of a system, trying to get better scores on critical dimensions, seeking advantage again. But the key is acute time frame, looking back to project forward. Now, the other time frame is future oriented, right? And a broader time frame. So it looks ahead. And in looking ahead, what's the key constraint? The key constraint is change, right? And two, seeking advantage in that acute time frame means that there will be adaptations created by various roles adapting to take advantage of new capabilities, right? This means that, right, success drives change. Local gaps don't disappear, but move and change. So the local adaptations for challenge change to bridge gaps as new ones appear in order to keep a system that's inherently going to be messy on the edge running. So our longer time frame is future-oriented, anticipatory. And what's critical about that anticipatory look ahead is the potential to adapt, being poised to adapt in the recognition that however successful we've been in the past, however we are improving on some criteria in the past, the world will throw new surprises. So we have to have the potential, adaptive capacity as the potential to act when things change, regardless of how our trajectory of improvement in the past. So this future-oriented thinks about what are the constraints to be able to adapt, to prepare in advance, to have this potential, right, to adapt when challenges change, when the nature of the system changes, when the network and its configurations and interdependencies change. Again, right, look at the complexification video. Now, that's great. We look ahead. We're anticipating. We're saying, what do we need to do to deal with uncertainty? Right? We introduce the novelty inequality because we can't know for sure how this will evolve, what kinds of things will happen, but we know a bit about the shape of things and what we might need in order to respond. And we explore this, for example, in emergency rooms in a beyond surge capacity event. We explore this in the ability to, right, avoid saturation, decompensation by being able to deploy, right, resources to handle challenge, by being able to mobilize additional capabilities to handle an increasing challenge or cope with the deteriorating situations, or even go further. And how do we generate additional capabilities and resources, right, as a challenge case extends in time, scale, and impact? So the future-oriented is pointing back and saying, what do I need to invest in now so that I will be able to adapt in the future when things change? So it looks ahead, understanding the challenge, the nature of challenge at a more abstract level, not just the specifics, but the general nature of handling challenge. Right? And comes back and says, how do I provision a system in order to be able to be poised to adapt when new challenges, new surprises arise at the borders of the competence envelope. Now we have two temporal perspectives, right? The operation on seeking opportunity and handling challenge is different in those two temporal frames of reference. Okay, that seems all right. Is this a problem? The answer is yes, because they are not linearly related. They are not simply additive. Instead, they interact, because when you look ahead, right, and then come back to provision the system with capabilities to be poised to adapt, those look like inefficiencies when you're seeking opportunity based on looking back in the short-term perspective, the acute time perspective, right? And that looks like an inefficiency or extra or waste, right? Decreasing your scores on critical criterion as you seek advantage by seeking improvement in this acute or narrower temporal frame that starts looking backwards. So looking ahead on handling challenge, that temporal frame is a nonlinear relationship to the short-term acute temporal frame on seeking opportunity. That interaction, right, that trade-off becomes critical. In the language that we've developed about drawing on the history of adaptation in biology, these things are all called adaptive value. Adapting, whether seeking opportunity or handling challenge in either time frame, adaptation is going on, and it is seeking value. Though notice what value means is different for the different perspectives of the agents or roles and layers in which those adaptations, that section of a distributed layered network, tangled layered network, is going on. So the term biology used is adaptive value. But our new understanding highlights that it's not a single parameter. It's not a single value. In fact, it's two. We call it net adaptive value. Net adaptive value is I need to seek opportunity in the short run, in that acute temporal frame. That, in biology, is a process of specialization. I need to be better fit in the environment I am currently in, and by better understanding the variability, characteristics, resources, and affordances of that world presents to me now in this short-term time horizon, right, I can adapt what I do to better fit that environment. So specialization plays out. Now remember, specialization, becoming more fit in this current time frame, this acute time frame, changes both the environment and the agent or role adapting to that environment. Now, let's look the other way, across the diagonal in our little diagram, to handling challenge with the future longer term time horizon. What's going on there? Biology understands that being competent now, or becoming more competent, more fit to the current environment, is insufficient. Why? Because the guarantee that things will change. Right? Our three fundamentals, finite resources, continuing change, and others adapting for advantage, means the future will be different than the past. So I need to provision, right, biological systems at any scale has to have a provisioning for the ability to change how it works when change happens ahead. So I have two forms of adaptive value, right? I have the short-term acute time frame improvements, faster, better, cheaper, specialization, at the same time that I have to have extensibility. I have to have extensibility in the face of change and the potential for challenges that will produce brittle collapse, because there's always a boundary to my competence envelope. This leads us to one of the fundamental findings, right? Viability in the longer run requires extensibility. That's a hard constraint, fundamental. super strong law. That's the way this universe works. Viability, right, in the not that long ahead time frame, will require extensibility. So we have to invest in extensibility, right? At the same time, we need to become more fit, more specialized to our environment in the shorter run acute time frame. So these two things both have to happen. Right? That's a key principle. Net adaptive value is what we're going after. That means that a minimum 2 numbers, however hard they are to get estimates of, I need 2 numbers, and I need to balance the fact that they are nonlinearly related. That's tremendously difficult for organizations today as the pressure for near-term improvements grows. And that pressure comes from where? Other roles at other layers in the distributed, tangled, layered network.